Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode. I am so excited for this episode. We are going to talk about the top 5 mistakes that we see people make in a job search. And why are we talking about these? Not to shame anybody, not to call anybody out. You don't need to feel bad if you've done one of those things. We're doing this so that you can improve, so that everybody can grab a job that fulfills them, that's going to make them happy. Everybody in the world, I think, has applied for a job that they really wanted. But these 5 mistakes will absolutely just put your job search to a stop. So we're going to share these 5 mistakes so that you don't make them and you can grab that job that you love. All right. Number 1, Dave, we're talking about email addresses.
All right. So there's a lot of things in the job search that are kind of like hidden signals and just like sort of represent your professionalism. If you've got an email address that you signed up for in high school, that's some sort of silly name that you didn't realize, gamerforlife@gmail.com. Don't use that email address for job searching. Get as close to your first name and last name as possible. If your first name and last name are taken, add some numbers, add your birthday, maybe set up a new email address just for job searching. People look at those things. It's all these little subtle signals that represent your professionalism that you'd be surprised how many people don't realize. So, I'll broaden that to like everything you do. Make sure that professionalism comes through. But the email is one that you can really slip up on. That's kind of a mistake.
Totally agree. Gmail is free. You can't go wrong there. Outlook is free. Can't go wrong there too. Some people love the Microsoft world. But I would avoid some of the older email platforms. Not because they're bad. Like Yahoo email addresses, like the email box works fine. You log in, you can read stuff, you can send stuff, you can organize. Like Yahoo emails are fine. But if somebody's reading in between the lines and the company's looking for somebody who's tech forward, if the job involves being able to use more complex tools or technology, they might infer that you're not using the latest and greatest technology and that it might be hard for you to pick up some of the technology that you might need in the job. Now, is that true? Might be. Could also not be at all. But you don't even want a chance of somebody almost accidentally inferring that. So, number 1, use a professional email handle. Use Gmail or Outlook. You can't go wrong with either of those. Number 2, we're talking about no LinkedIn profile.
You can't job search in today's world without having LinkedIn. LinkedIn is your professional billboard. It's almost like not having an email address at this point. It is a basic expectation. If you don't have an email, a LinkedIn profile, people are just gonna be like curious, like, what? How could this person not be on LinkedIn? What are they looking to hide? What are they trying to hide? So, absolutely take the time. Like all these things are annoying, but at the end of the day, it's really about presenting your best self. If you're worried about like sharing too much information, you could really dial it back. You don't have to share extra things, but you really want to make sure that you are on LinkedIn so that when people search for you, they find you and that you can link to it on your resume. So you absolutely want to have a LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, in the US market, in the Canadian market, in the Australian market, New Zealand, like LinkedIn absolutely must have critical. In some countries that might not be applicable, but in most Western countries, you absolutely should have a LinkedIn profile.
And
Quick
don't
things.
worry. And don't worry too much about engaging. That doesn't mean you got to go post and comment and, be active on LinkedIn. That's what I've seen people come up with. It's like, but does that mean I need to go comment on all my friends' stuff? Do I need to be post? No, you don't have to do any of that. Just have a headshot, a banner, your title, light career history, and you're it. That's it. But you got to have at least that.
Yeah, the quick checklist, clean photo that you're the only one in on it, in the photo. Doesn't need to be a fancy photographer. Somebody can take it using the portrait mode on an iPhone. If you don't have an iPhone, ask to borrow one. You can also do it on an Android phone. Clean background against a brick wall, a white wall, some trees, just something not busy. And then just fill in your jobs and one paragraph of text in your about section and you're good to go. But to Dave's point, you don't have to be publishing posts or commenting on everybody's feed. You just want a professional LinkedIn profile. And you can connect with people that you've worked in the past, people that you've gone to school with in the past, and that's it.
Yeah, and I'd say those are even nice to have. So you should definitely do it. You don't need to do it. And to help you out, if you install the Teal Chrome extension, we will actually algorithmically like check your LinkedIn profile for you. We give you a little checklist. It's free. It's super easy. It'll give you feedback on your headline, your banner. So just, definitely have one.
We'll put a link to that in the show notes if you're listening to this podcast, or down in the description if you're watching this on YouTube. The Teal Chrome extension has this LinkedIn reviewer that Dave's talking about. All right, mistake number 3, not doing research. And research, we're talking about a couple of different areas, right?
Yeah, so you can really research the people in the company as you look at opportunities. And what you should be, if you go into an interview and you ask questions that are super Googleable, you just look bad. It's like you could have found that on our website. And so the more information's power, the more you know going into an interview or applying to a job, the more you can sort of come off as someone who understands, and you're giving them an example of what it's like to work with you. You're a person who does your research, who gets informed, and you lose the risk of misstepping, right? So you go into an interview. I remember one time I had a friend that was interviewing at Bloomberg, and Michael Bloomberg was running for president. Like, what do you think is being talked about at that company, right? Like, obviously that's like big things, but be aware of what matters at the company. So there's also kind of the time component, long-term, short-term, what's going on with the company. The more informed and the more sensitivity you can have to those things, the more you can look professional.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You don't want to ask questions that you can just find on the company website, sometimes even on the career website. If you want to take it to the next level of turning this in from a mistake into something that makes you look great, is a second level question. What I mean by a second level question is, at the end of every interview, you have an opportunity, most of the time, to ask a question. The interviewer will say, "Hey, do you have any questions for me?" That's an ability for you to be able to show that you've done some research. So a level 2 question is a question that you can only know to ask if you've done a little bit of research. So an example of that, for instance, is if you're interviewing at a company like Tesla, you might have listened to their Q3 earnings call. And on there, the Tesla said that Tesla is facing a variety of challenges like semiconductor shortages and congestion at the ports. And so a level 2 question might be something like, I was listening to the Q3 earnings call and there's supply chain issues, and that's clearly impacting a lot of different companies. What role is your team playing in trying to mitigate these shortages? And that actually turns a mistake that many candidates make, which is not doing enough research, and you're positioning it as a strength instead. So that's number 3.
100%. 100%.
Number 4. I'm shocked at how many people don't write one of these and just shoot it off in an email or put it in the mail and send it back when physical offices were a thing. Dave, what are we talking about here?
Oh, this one is one I have strong feelings about. I've probably interviewed 100 people in the last 3 months, and maybe 20% actually sent me a thank you email.
It is so shocking to me.
It is, like, again, I get it. It's annoying. It's one more thing. I have had some people tell me that they don't like them, but that is the anomaly. It is just sort of common courtesy, manners. It shows you care. It's an indicator of how you operate. I would say just like pre-write these, have them ready after an interview, send a thank you email. Really, just like one line. If you want to take it to the next level and like address something you talked about in the interview, great. But hey, Vincent, thanks so much for the time today. I look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all you got to do. Do not forget to do that. It is, for me personally, such a deal breaker. For all the recruiters I've talked to, it's just expected. It's not going to make you stand out, but you really should do it.
I've interviewed thousands at this point, thousands of people at this point. And I would say out of 100, I get maybe 20 thank you emails and maybe 5 handwritten cards, which means 75 people out of 100, no follow-up. So if a common objection, though, is I don't know the hiring manager's email address, I don't know where to mail a physical card to. If you have a desire to mail a physical card, I
don't recommend. I don't recommend it. Yeah, maybe you and I can have difference of opinion on this one, because
I just think have a difference of opinion on this one.
Because I just think it takes too long, right? Or do both, right? Because like if it takes 3 days for it to get there, You don't know if their mail packaging is going to send it to them on time. So I just feel like you're leaving too much to chance. Now, as a secondary, that could be cool. But I think as your primary, I would avoid. That's my opinion.
My opinion's kind of changed. Prior to the pandemic, I liked it. The interviews were in person at the office. You could easily mail it there and it would show up on my desk pretty quickly. If you wanted to guarantee it got to the desk, you could literally drop it off like at the security desk and it would end up on my desk 20 minutes later. And I think it's a nice touch. Now with remote jobs and how many companies are remote and how many interviews are happening remote, then I think it's harder to do. So I think the email is just as good. If you send a handwritten card, it does have to be secondary to Dave's point. And I would follow it up with something like a LinkedIn connection request with a nice little note in the connection request.
And
but
another point that
go ahead.
And to another point that Vincent brought up that I sort of jumped in and cut him off on was if you don't have the person's email address, I would also try to remove intermediaries. So don't send it to the recruiter and have them forward it for you. You really want to eliminate risk, and it's easy enough to find people's email address at this point. So either write the recruiter and ask for the email address, look at the calendar invite, see if you can get it. Go to something like one of these mail. What's one of those mail email?
Rocket Reach.
There's there's a bunch of other. If you bookmark them on the Teal Chrome extension, it'll try to guess their email address for you with a third-party service, but it's hit or miss. But definitely get their email address and email them directly. Try not to have it passed off. And also, here's another one: if you are in a panel interview, send individual thank yous. Don't send one group thank you to everybody.
Yeah, I would add to that, and I would say send individual, slightly different messages to everybody on the interview panel. And it is absolutely okay to ask the recruiter for email addresses for the purpose of sending thank you notes. It's also okay if you, before an interview, to ask a recruiter for the names and titles of the people that you're going to be interviewing with. Names and titles of the people that you're going to be interviewing with before the interview. Totally cool to be able to ask for. All right.
Yeah, and great for the research point as well, right? You need that to be able to do your research.
Absolutely. And mistake number 5, not following up.
Yeah, and this is kind of in line with the thank you, right? A lot of people, ghosting is unfortunately way more prevalent than ever. But it's oftentimes I'll reply to someone oh, thank you so much for following up. I had been meaning to write you. It's super important, and it's just part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's a lot of different things happening behind the scenes. You may never know what's happening. Somebody could have a family crisis. Other priorities in the business might have come up. Could just be waiting for one last person to finish their interview before they reach back out to all the candidates with news. But a short, succinct, polite follow-up is great. An even better follow-up is adding something on from your last conversation. Hey, Dave, we had a brief conversation about crypto. What did you think about this thing that happened today? By the way, whenever you have an update, would love to follow up on the open role. So if you can add to the conversation and keep the conversation going, then the follow-up even seems more natural and slightly less, self-serving or pesky, but it furthers the conversation, but it's also natural. That's how humans interact. And you're just continuing the conversation that you already had. All right. Yeah. Top 5 job mistakes that we see candidates make and how to avoid them. Number 1, not having a professional email address, using a modern email provider. Number 2, not having a LinkedIn profile. Number 3, not doing enough research on the company or on the person that you're about to research with. Doesn't mean you have to go stalking into their private lives, but you should absolutely take a look at their LinkedIn profile. Take a look at if they've been mentioned in the news or if they've been on a podcast recently. Number 3, not sending a thank you note. And number 4, not following back. If at the end of your interview, you can ask the question, what should I expect for next steps? And if they say they're going to make a decision in 2 weeks, then in 2 weeks, if that time has passed, that's a great time to follow up. And so not following up is mistake number 5. Those are the top mistakes to avoid in your next job search. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.